All right. Hi, my name is Peter Gilroy with Bonny Doon Tools. We are back here today for video number 4 of our hydraulic forming class, where we're teaching you all about hydraulic presses. Today we're going to be covering non-conforming dies. Now, first of all, what is a non-conforming die? A lot of the original dies were made out of tool steel and were a positive and a negative die. These were conforming dies. So as opposed to a conforming die, a non-conforming die is going to be usually done in the negative, and then we're using polyurethane to push our metal down into that die. So we don't have mating dies, but because of polyurethane and how amazing it is, this gives us a really affordable and easy way to get really incredible form with our pieces. So silhouette dies have sort of 1 degree of complexity. A non-conforming die all of a sudden gives us complete total control over that 3-dimensional shape, giving us the ability to add a lot more detail and form and make some really incredible pieces. Also gives us the ability to have really repeatable results. There's a finite limit to our die, and therefore we can get perfectly repeatable results time after time after time. I really love non-conforming dies because they can be made fairly easily at your jewelry bench. We can sit down with a piece of steel or brass or aluminum or acrylic, and we can actually hand carve these dies. Of course, you can always get them custom made, but being able to hand carve a die to give 3-dimensional shape to any of your ideas is really incredible, really powerful. And yeah, I really do believe this is one of the most powerful and useful dies of all of the different types. Now, on the market out there being made by many different companies are what are called impression dies. Almost all impression dies that you can buy essentially are going to be a non-conforming die of some sort. I generally prefer to use that non-conforming die with polyurethane. Other people will teach using lead and using other techniques, but the polyurethane really is quite effective. And we're going to go through all of the steps today to getting really highly detailed quality pieces out of this. Now this technique is forming, so we're bending a sheet over the peaks and valleys of our die. So we're not quite coining. And we'll talk more in future videos about coining again. And essentially the one thing you need to know is that the pressures required for that coining, where we're completely restructuring the metal, require much harder materials. Again, when we come back to non-conforming dies, because we're using the polyurethane, we don't need to be working in tool steel here. These pieces are going to be better as simpler overall 3-dimensional forms. And when I talk about design and working with these, I'll show you some of like the details that work well and details that don't work well. But essentially, one of the beauty of this is we don't have to work in tool steel. Now, every technique has its pros and cons. Like we were talking about, non-conforming dies give us incredible repeatability, give us a finite depth to work with, and they give us a much better control of the overall shape of our piece. They are very affordable dies. They're easy to make on your own out of aluminum, brass, steel, or acrylic. We've got a couple different sets that you can work with different dies in that capacity. Now, because it is forming, we are limited to how much detail we can get. We can't get super sharp edges on our finished piece of jewelry. We can get nice, crisp, sharp details. We'll get more into that exactly. We also have to contend with what thickness of metal we want to be working in. The thicker the metal, the more bend radius it's going to have. And so if we want to get really detailed pieces, we're going to have to work with thinner metal. So we don't have quite as much leeway in working with different gauges of metal and getting all the detail out of it. Before we start digging into the how-to of working with these dies and making our own, let's go ahead and look at some samples. All right, so here we have an acrylic die of a bow tie. This was CNC machined, and you can see here the formed piece. So again, it really gives us a lot more complexity, gives us the ability to create different forms and depths and shapes in one single piece. Here's a nice little one as well. And something like this could theoretically be done with a silhouette die with two different parts, but we don't have as much control and it's a little more difficult to get our full shape. So this piece here really gives us a lot better control over that. Again, I showed this piece previously, and this could be done with a silhouette die, but with this non-conforming die, it just makes it a little easier to control and get repeatable results. This is a really incredible die. This was hand carved by Phil Poirier, just using some ball burrs. So just taking your time, doing a good layout, and then this is 30 gauge gold that was pressed into that and sawn out. So really incredible piece that you can do. Now this might take you a couple hours to make at first, but you get faster and faster and better, and you'll be creating stuff like this in no time. Got a bunch of other, these are all hand carved variations from Phil Poirier, from some classes. We've done nice little hearts or leaves. Got this one as well. This is a little flower that we did in class. And just a really simple overall shape done in that. So this is done in acrylic. Not going to give us amazing detail, but gives us a nice three-dimensional form there. Now these are all different ones that were done in our high pressure container, and this gives us really incredible, tremendous detail. These are forms from some different dies that were done on a 18th century rose engine. They were cut on this really amazing, beautiful rose engine lathe. There's some conchos, and we also have a bunch of different locket dies now. Again, these are some more really incredible dies cut on this 18th century rose engine lathe. And then you can see this locket die here is what I used to create this locket. So it's in order to form the two halves of that really quick and easily. And this is designed to fit discs, so you don't even have to cut after forming. That's one of the other big pros to this technique, is that you can cut the piece out before you form it, and that allows you to save a lot of material. I also want to show you this one last little form. This is a really unique one, and this was done, it was blanked and formed all in one in a special die that Dar Shelton made. We don't have that die to show you, but Dar gave us this example just to show. Really cool, and if you wanted to do forms like this, that's something that you could theoretically cut and form all in one. Today we're going to be working with these non-conforming dies in two different tool sets. First off, we are going to start with our precision die containment system, which is designed to use 2-inch diameter dies that are pre-made, ones that you can buy from us. You can have us custom make for you, or you can make yourself. There are brass blanks, so you can actually carve your own dies. We'll be showing that later on in the video. And the other thing we're going to be working with is the 3-inch form box kit. We covered this in the silhouette die video, and this container is really awesome because it can be used for silhouette dies and for non-conforming dies when we are working in acrylic. So we're going to be covering both of these today, but first let's start with our precision container. So this is a very high precision container, and the idea behind that, the reason why we need that, is for these highly detailed dies, we want all of the pressure of our polyurethane to be going down into our metal, into the die. So having really good containment is important. That keeps the urethane from flowing outwards, and because of that, all of the pressure is going down into our piece. So this container is rated for the 20-ton press. It's also rated for a 55-ton press. 55-ton press just gives us a whole nother 2.5 times more power to be able to get more detail out of thicker metal. So precision machined container here, and this kit comes with a precision hardened punch. This is the top of our container. And we get 3 different urethanes. So the 3 different urethanes are going to be 2 of the red 95 durometer urethane, one that's domed, and the dome is kind of a preform, so this works good when we have a die that's a nice gentle negative shape like that. We have a flat for all other shapes, And we also have a 60 durometer. Again, this is soft, and the soft urethane is going to help us with volume. So first up, let's jump in this and press something. I've got a piece of 22 gauge brass. This disc is cut to 1 3/4 inches. And we're going to be starting off with this really nice, beautiful die made in brass. And if you look closely at this, it's got nice sharp points sticking up out of the die. Because of that, when we push our metal down into it, is actually going to show, those lines are going to be crisp and sharp in our finished piece. And then the positive part of our finished piece is going to have this nice dome. So because this set is so precision made, we've got to make sure everything is nice and clean. One of the best ways to clean dust and debris and dirt off of your tooling is with clean, dry hands. It's an old machinist trick. We use it here when we're making tools every single day. So make sure this is nice and clean. You want to be careful if you're working in a studio and you're grinding with abrasives and stuff here on one side of your bench, and then you have all your dies over here. You're essentially getting that sandpaper grit, that abrasive grit all over your dies. So that's why it's really important, ideally, to isolate that, but also to make sure to clean everything before we use it. So that's wicked clean, super nice here. Now our punch, I'm going to check it as well. And this is a hardened steel punch with a very precise tight fit. Hear that? So we want to make sure this is nice and clean. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our die. Make sure this is also clean. Clean that off, wipe it off with alcohol if you need to. And this is a nice tight fit in there. It's going to go and drop right down in. Got my 22 gauge brass, that's going to go in from the top. And now if I take my urethane and I just drop it in there, it's going to bounce that disc out of place. So what I like to do is take a little bit of double stick tape, and I'm going to put it on my punch and double stick tape the urethane to that punch. Now with the urethane on there, I can carefully put this down into my container. Double check, make sure my disc is aligned, and the punch is going to go down in there. Now, because of the level of detail and because we're working with 22 gauge metal, which is not super thick, but it's not that thin either, I'm going to use a lot of pressure on here. This is a heavy duty steel container, and because I'm using a lot of pressure, right? If we go back to that intro video, we want to be aware of material properties and pressure. I am going to use either aluminum spacers or likely just my steel platens in the press. It's going to be far better to be pressing this container and this punch into aluminum and steel. Just steel is totally fine. But I don't want to be using acrylic spacers in the press when I'm doing techniques like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this up to probably around 8 or 10,000 PSI, so full like 16 to 20 tons. Takes a bit of a workout to do this on a manual press, but kind of put my weight into it and bring that up to 10,000 PSI, 20 tons of force. And let's see how that looks. So again, kind of how I was explaining. I mean, this is, 22 gauge brass. It's got really nice crisp details here. Good smooth domes. If we look at the back side, those same crisp details are really rounded over. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about bend radius. So all depends on what direction the detail is going in here. But just like that, I have this nice, crisp, clean, amazing piece that I can use to create a concho or a box top or a pendant or earrings or whatever you can imagine. Now, let's go ahead and work with a die that's a little more difficult to get. So this here, you can see, is almost hemispherical. It's a very deep, smaller diameter die. So I've got some 22 gauge discs cut here. And what I want to do is I want to preform my metal to get it down in that die. If I try to do this flat, that metal is going to flow down over the edge and potentially rip on this crisp, sharp edge, you know, those corners in there. So in order to preform this, what I'm going to do is set up my press with the master tool holder and a mushroom former. So I went to my set of DAPs and I found one that very closely matches the radius of this die. All right, so in order to hold our DAP in place in the press, we're gonna bolt in our master tool holder. That bolts into the two outside holes. Now, if you can't quite see or reach the top of your press, you're gonna have to do this just by feel. Now, my DAP goes in there. And on the back side here, you can't see, but I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that set screw down. That holds that in place. Got our container. So now if we put our brass in place there, this is going to allow us to preform that metal so it fits down into the die, helping it flow better. I just want to center this. And it's gonna wrinkle a little bit. I don't want it to wrinkle too much, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop it about there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and anneal this, and then we'll come back and we'll press it. Okay, so I've got my annealed piece here. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the die, drop that into the container first. Again, make sure everything is nice and clean. Now I'm gonna put just a little bit of liquid Burlife, just one dot on each side, and then I'm gonna rub that all around. That's gonna help my piece flow and move into that die best. I'm gonna drop that in. Now I wanna make sure that that little dimple that we created goes down into that. And this, again, it's important that I have this double stick taped to the punch so that I don't knock that out of its place. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in. Now let's go ahead and press. This is probably going to take all the pressure, so I'm just going to go all the way up to 10,000 psi. All the way, max pressure. And here you go. We can look at this, but let's take a look at the die. And if we're looking at this and the die, I'm not getting all the detail yet there. Now, it is possible that my metal's too thick, but if I want to really just keep pushing it, what I'm going to do is go anneal and press again. In this way, I can usually squeeze extra detail out of my piece of metal. So I'm going to anneal, we'll press it again and show you what it looks like. That's nicely annealed, so I'm going to go ahead and repeat the steps I did previously. First though, I'm going to start by getting this back into the die. Making sure that that fits nicely in there, it's nice and snug. Now I'm going to carefully drop this in here. Making sure that stays in place. Insert urethane and punch and press again. All right, so now I've got a nice form here. Good, crisp, detailed. For this form with its shapes, 22 gauge is very thick, and I'm not getting all the fine little detail that I see here in this die. So this is one of the limitations with non-conforming dies, is I'm not always gonna get super fine detail if I'm wanting to work with thicker metal. So there's a little bit of a toss-up deciding what. Now, I'm gonna go ahead, I'll press this again in thinner metal to show you what it looks like. I've now got a piece of 28 gauge brass that has been annealed. I'm gonna go ahead and preform this as well, just like I did before. Now, thin metal tends to wrinkle a lot more, so I'm going to be gentle and not form it quite as much. And it's already wrinkling a lot. Little burr life. And drop it down in here. Let's go ahead and remove this from the press. Now, if you'll notice, I have the 60 durometer black polyurethane double stick taped to the punch. And this way, I can help that metal get down further into that shape before I switch to the harder polyurethane. Again, this is gonna help me with volume. It's gonna allow that thin metal to flow down into the die without as much force on those edges. So hopefully that will keep this thin metal from ripping. So I didn't take that up to full pressure. I want to see what it looks like. You can see there, it's down in the form, but not a whole lot of detail yet. So, pop the black polyurethane off, put the red polyurethane back, and since I haven't done too aggressive of forming on here, I'm not going to anneal it right now. I'm going to switch straight to the 95D and now take it up to full 10,000 PSI, 20 tons of force. Now, one thing you'll notice when you're using this is really important, I should have mentioned it earlier, but this should spin freely in there. You want to make sure that it's not jammed or stuck sideways. If it doesn't go all the way down and spin freely, do not press. That is dangerous and it will cause these two to get jammed together. So again, just some of the bullet points of working with this, make sure it's wicked clean, everything's nice and clean. Make sure this punch is all the way down and it spins freely. And now let's press. Taking this all the way up to 10,000 PSI. Looks pretty good. You can see from my dapping that I did create enough of a wrinkle that wrinkle is stuck in there. It's outside of the shape, so I'm not too worried. Pretty good form and detail. I'm gonna go ahead and anneal this, come back and press again. One of the other things I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna trim some of this flange away just to get rid of that, hopefully allow the metal to draw down into the die a bit better. Got my piece trimmed and annealed. I'm gonna put it back down into the die, make sure it fits nicely there. And urethane, and press again all the way up to 10,000 PSI, as far as you can go. I wanna get all that detail, and that takes pressure. All right, and here you see those nice fine lines in the piece, good detail. So it's able to get pretty much 97, 98% of the detail from this die in this piece. And this piece, even though it's 28 gauge brass, it's really rigid right now. So this is gonna make a good, strong, and very lightweight piece. So there's a little bit of the troubleshooting that goes on. And it's hard to say like, use this thickness of metal, anneal here, do this. It's hard to follow a perfect recipe because inevitably when we're working on our designs, we might need to use a thicker gauge for a specific reason, or we might need to use a thinner gauge. So there's always going to be a little bit of give and take and experimentation. Again, take notes on this stuff, write down notes, and that's going to help you so much, especially as you come back to these techniques again and again. Now, I want to cover a little bit of maintenance on this. Just I'm talking about how beautiful, precision made these pieces are. With all of our dies, especially steel, we want to take good care of it. Want to make sure stuff is nice and clean. So in order, first of all, to keep things from rusting, we want to make sure we keep these pieces with a fine coat of oil. WD-40 works great, even a little bit of Burr Life on a paper towel, and occasionally I'm going to wipe down all my tools and make sure that that stays oily. This is something we do to all of our tooling before we ship it out to you. We make sure everything's nice and coated. Ideally, there should be no rust on that. If you live in a humid place, and you're gonna inevitably be battling rust, so making sure your tools are nice and clean and oiled all the time. And then when I come back to use this the next time, I'm gonna go ahead and wipe it down again just to make sure it's super clean. Same goes with our dies. We want to make sure those don't get rusty. You know, if you're living in the south in the humid summer, it'll be nice. You're going to have to do this a lot just to make sure that things stay good. You can also do this and then seal them in little baggies or something if you're having issues with rust. One of the great things about the 3-inch form box is how versatile it is. We can do silhouette dies like I showed in the previous video, from very small up to very big and deep forms. And the other thing we can do now is make our own acrylic non-conforming die. So showed you the sample of this. This was one that was very hastily carved in a piece of cast acrylic, and then a piece was cut out and dropped into there and formed. Like I was saying, with the non-conforming die, we don't need a flange, so we can actually cut out our piece ahead of time and then drop it into a little recess or just into the overall shape, get it lined up and press it. The beauty of that is we can get much better yield on our material, and the project we're going to be working with right now is with a blanking die. You can see here I got this from Dar Shelton, big heart blanking die, and I got a piece of copper 20 gauge that was annealed and roller printed. And out of this piece, if I was doing it with a silhouette die, I could maybe get 2 out of here, but it'd be really tough. In this capacity, I'm gonna easily get 2 out of here and have metal left over for other things. So I'm gonna be able to blank out the piece first, and then we're gonna go ahead and make the die and carve it in acrylic and form it. Got my press set up with 2 aluminum spacers. Anytime we're working with blanking dies, we have a very thin piece, nice thin setup, and so I can't do this without spacers. I'm gonna need at least 2 spacers plus the blanking die for doing this. So what I wanna do is make sure, again, when I'm using blanking dies, you can see these 2 holes here, they don't cut from this point down, so just this portion of the blanking die cuts. So I get this all lined up, and I want to make sure the whole cutting edge is supported. So, you know, you can see here, I'm cutting out all the way around. Now I'm going to place this there, centered, and press. Now, these are true blanking dies, which means that they cut very well, very cleanly. There's almost no burr on the back of this piece. And like I was saying, I can go ahead and now I can get another piece out of here. And still have a lot of metal left over. So in this capacity, if I was working with a piece of silver here, this would give me the chance to do 3 separate pieces, where with the silhouette die needing the flange, it would be a little more difficult to do and get as many out of the same piece. So it helps save material, and there's a lot of, you know, pros and cons to working with this. So let's pop out another one. Got my heart here, and I'm gonna go and run to my guillotine shear and shear off this little tab. So it's always nice when you have a design, if there's any flat areas, you can use that for the tab of the blanking die, and that it gives you the ability to just shear that off really quickly. A guillotine shear is one of my favorite tools. I'll be right back. Got my heart here, and I've got my piece of acrylics. The first step I'm going to do here is transfer my design to the acrylic. No, I took the paper off so that I can easily get a nice clean, crisp line. Now I'm going to take some double stick tape, and I'm going to put this on my piece here just to roughly hold it in place. It's not perfect, but it is going to help. And if you notice, I put my piece face down. Now, I have a nice hardened steel scribe here so that I can scratch into the acrylic and get a nice good crisp line. So I still want to hold my piece down. The double stick tape helps, but it's not going to hold it perfectly. All right, so now I've got that outline. Now the outline's important. It is not absolutely critical because I've already got my piece cut out. So really what I'm just focusing on is the overall general soft three-dimensional form for this heart. So got my outline ready, and I'm going to show you now how to carve. So when I'm carving in acrylic, I'm just going to use big high quality burrs first. So generally this is like a 3mm burr, and then I have these silicone wheels, abrasive wheels, the white and the black. The Dedico wheels are really one of my best friends when it comes to this. I want to go pretty aggressive with this, so not super duper fast. Again, I don't want to heat things up. A little bit of burr life is going to help, and what the first step that I'm really focusing on is volume. Not worrying about any details. This is going to be a nice, smooth, simple shape. So I just kind of want to highlight where in this piece are the lowest points. So probably around here, right? That's going to be the deepest parts of this whole piece. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to start working there. I'm going to start creating that volume first and then working out to this edge. So a little burr life. Again, like everything at the bench, hammering, sawing, filing, having your lighting set up so that you can see well is critical. So move your lights around, take the time to make sure that you can see well, so you can see what you're doing. And trick two, if you go from the back side, you can kind of see what's happening a little better. Again, just focusing on the volume here. And notice I'm controlling my tool, so I want to be moving this around. I don't just put it down and set it. Then it's going to dig and it's going to like jerk off to the side. So what I want to do is control this and kind of etch-a-sketch my piece. So moving it around gently, controlling the depth, controlling where it goes. This really makes a mess, so if you do have a dust collector of some kind, it would be really helpful. Also notice the way that I'm set up here. I've got this at a slight angle, holding it securely. There's some really good jigs out there for holding this stuff. Check out Jane Redmond's tools. I use my GRS engraver block pretty often. But either way, I'm pretty secure holding at this, and then I also am securing my hand here. So I'm bracing my hand on my bench pin so that I'm not just free-handing this in space. I really want to control this and be as stable as possible. So being planted and stabilized is really helpful. And then I'm sort of, again, etch-a-sketching my way through this. Now I'm feeling and checking and trying to gauge how deep I want to go. It's a good idea to think about all this stuff before you start carving and even draw out what you want that three-dimensional shape to look like. Now when I'm carving in the negative, I'll use modeling clay to go ahead and press into my piece to see what it looks like. Now it's kind of hard to see, but if you get it just right in glancing light, you can kind of see. It's a really rough, funky form right now, but gives me an idea of the overall volume. I've still got a long way to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and just keep working this. I'm staying kind of away from the edges here and slowly working the center portion where I want it to be deepest, and then slowly moving out, keeping that line intact. That's gonna give me the best control. A little burr life and go. A lot of people recommend using wax burrs for this, but I find them to be a little chattery, much harder to control, and they don't tend to be as sharp and cut as well. So I just use good kind of standard cheap Link or Technique burrs, and you know, the bigger the better when I'm working on a big broad shape like this. Now that I'm getting pretty close to the final shape here, I'm gonna switch to this Dedico white silicone abrasive wheel. When you're working on stuff like this, if you can make the tool fit the shape, it's going to help you quite a bit. If you're trying to carve a really broad, big, smooth shape with a tiny little ball burr, it's going to be really, really difficult. But I want a big, broad, smooth shape, and I have a big diameter abrasive wheel here, and that's going to help me quite a bit. So again, just going in, and this is going to help me smooth things out. Now, don't get too crazy with the speed on this. This is going to tend to heat up a little more, so keep the speed lower. And now I'm always working against the direction of the cutting wheel. So the cutting wheel is spinning that way, right? And I'm gonna kind of cut up into the line from this direction. So I'm not letting it back into the line. I have bad control that way. I'm pushing it this way. And I'm working that volume, but now I'm starting to work up to that line. Gonna probably want to wear a dust mask while you're doing this. And again, I'm kind of moving this around. I like to say etch-a-sketch, but really what I mean is you're kind of moving it around, you're smoothing stuff out. But ultimately, you are controlling exactly where this burr goes. Having that stable position is really going to help. But I don't just put the piece down, turn it on, and let it go. You know, I put this down, and I sort of control, watching exactly what I'm doing. All right, now this wheel's getting small. So I'm gonna have to switch it out for a new one. All right, a nice fresh wheel here. And this is going to be way better. Now I'm gonna work my way up right to that line and just barely get it. And then I work back and I make sure that that whole shape is nice and smooth. No, I want to make sure. Just gonna work around, working up to that line constantly. Well, it's coming along. This lobe is pretty close to being done. We'll check it with clay in a second. I kind of feel it too. If you use your fingers in there, you can feel like, and I want this nice and smooth. Again, we're starting with a relatively simple non-conforming die here. And the idea is we're going to start simple, and then we're going to, as our skills progress, we're going to get more and more complex and detailed on these pieces. If I go over the line a little bit, it's no big deal, because again, my piece is already cut out, so I kind of screwed up there, but it's not going to matter. There it is, mostly finished. Let's go ahead and take a clay impression. And this is just a plasticine clay. You can use a little bit of talcum powder on it if you need. But that looks pretty good, pretty smooth. All right, let's go press it. Well, I got my acrylic die mostly roughed out. Looking pretty good. It feels pretty smooth. You know, one thing I paid special attention to was kind of this little point where the heart, or this could even be wings of some kind, comes together. And I left sort of a little ridge down into the die. And that's one of the places where the non-conforming dies gives you that little extra bit of control. So this took me about 5 minutes to rough out. It's pretty simple shape, but you know, give yourself some time, have a little more patience than I did here, and you can really develop this and get a lot more detailed. Now, I want to go ahead and press it, see what it looks like, because this is really going to tell me how I'm doing and do I need to go back and keep working it. So, 3-inch form box here, that's all empty. And what I want to put down in there first is a bunch of just regular acrylic spacers. No, nothing in them. And now I'm going to put down my piece of acrylic first. And I want to, first of all, just kind of think about my sandwich here. I talked about the sandwich, but acrylic's going to go down first in this case. So that way I can line up my piece face down on the die. And now I can go ahead and put my urethane in. Still looks pretty good. And the top of the container. Now that I have that all assembled neatly on the bench, I can go ahead and lift it up here and press it. This probably isn't going to take a whole lot of pressure. It's just a very simple form, but again, with this, I have a finite end, so I could, in theory, push it so far that it breaks, but most likely, I'm not going to be able to push it further than the die, obviously. So I'm just going to take it up to about 3,000 PSI. It is 20 gauge. That's been roller printed, so it's in a little bit of a work hardened state. Now, take a look at that. One thing too, if I look at the back and I kind of watch the reflection of it in there, that gives me a really good idea of the shape. And there's a couple funky little spots. So I'm going to go back to my bench real quick, refine this a touch, and then we'll be back to press it one final time. But overall, I like that shape. I just want to clean it up a little bit. I want to make it a little deeper out here towards the tips, and then I just want to smooth out a couple areas. So right in here where I want to deepen it, first of all, I'm going to start in the center. I'm going to kind of go in, and then I'm going to sort of do big circles around, going center and then back out. And that's one of the ways that I kind of work an area smoothly, sort of little spirals out. All right, clean that up. I think got it a little bit better. Now I'm gonna just put it back in my box, drop my piece in. It's gonna kind of sit right easily where it should. Then urethane and my pusher, or the top. Little bit of patience. I might sit and spend an hour to 2 hours working this die until I get it really, really beautiful right where I want it to be. But the beauty of this for simple, broad forms, again, I have better control than a silhouette die. It's very easy to get really repeatable results. And if I want to make a batch of 20 or 30 pairs of earrings out of 22, 24 gauge silver, these acrylic dies are going to be amazing. I don't need anything harder or more complex than this. So sit down, spend an hour playing around, refining, pressing your shape until you get it all perfect just how you want it. And now you've got this die and you can go ahead and pop out a bunch of these whenever you want. That's sort of the basics in a nutshell of how to carve your own non-conforming die. If you really want to get more into the acrylic and working these, another great resource out there is Jane Redmond. She makes a whole bunch of different tools and also teaches classes about this. You can always do private lessons with me as well if you want to get into this more. But that should give you a really good starting point. And again, just play around, be curious, and experiment and have fun. Try some different burrs. Try the Dedico silicone abrasive wheels. Those are really good. But don't be afraid to play around with these and see what you can do. And you'll really be surprised that once you learn how to use the tools in the acrylic, how fast and efficient and how much control you can have. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect here. So that's one of the beauties of it. So the next thing we're gonna do is take you through a similar journey with a brass non-conforming die that we're gonna use in the high pressure container. Again, when I'm working on smaller, more detailed pieces, I really prefer to be working directly into metal for my dies. It's slower, it's not as easy to cut, but I really find that it gives me much better control. All right, I'm sitting down at my engraving bench here, and this is where I'm going to be going ahead and carving this brass non-conforming die. Now, I've got a nice microscope and a GRS Magna block, which is really great for work holding and working on stuff. But mind you, it took me about 13, 14 years to build out this setup and this bench. So I did most everything for the previous 13 years with an optivisor and just a normal Fordham flex shaft. So even working in steel, we can do this with the flex shaft. It doesn't have to be done with fancy tools, engravers, micromotors, or even a microscope. I've got this stuff, so it definitely makes it a little bit nicer. It's going to make it easier for fine detail. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump on in here. I'm going to take you through this step by step, and we are going to make a brass non-conforming die. Okay, first off, I just wanted to show you my sample. So I went ahead and did a prototype in acrylic so that I could kind of work out some of the details, some of the issues. And this one I sprayed with Rio Grande Seat Check, this green powder, kind of give it a little bit contrast so we can see what's going on here. Um, but yeah, always good to prototype, prototype, prototype. And now that I've kind of worked out the details, I figured out what tools I'm going to need. I can go ahead and transition here. Got my brass blank here for the high pressure container, and I've got my design laid out on here. I used a laser because I've got one now, so why not? But there's a lot of different ways to transfer the design that work really well and that are cheap, if not free. So we'll get into another video talking about transfers. But anyways, for now, got this all chucked up in my GRS Magna block. And you can just do this on a bench pin if you need. But if you've got some kind of good work holding system like this, it definitely makes things a little bit easier. All right, so working through that prototype was really good because it told me that I needed additional tools that I didn't have. So I went ahead and I ordered a 3.5 and a 4 millimeter ball burr from Rio Grande. Not super expensive ones, just kind of standard mid-level steel. Don't need carbide for cutting the brass. The stuff cuts really easily and really well. Um, but I'm going to use some burr life. So first of all, a little bit of that. And I'm using my Ford micromotor here. Again, flex shaft or micromotor is going to work fine. We want to use a fairly light touch and spin with decently high speed. And always be cutting into the direction of the cutting tool. So first thing I'm going to do is start with this round puffed out area here using the biggest ball burr I've got and always going kind of against the cutting direction of the tool. Supporting yourself really well. Make sure you can see. And you can see here the way I have my hands laid out. I'm good and I'm secure and I'm always cutting again against that rotation. That's going to give me the best control. All right, and that's pretty good there. Just roughed out. We're going to come back and we'll keep refining this, but I'm just going to start with the volume. So now I'm going to go and orient myself, and I'm going to start digging away at the center of these petals. And I've got these lines drawn here because I want those to be little scallops in the leaf of the petal. And then about right here is going to be roughly the deepest part. So again, starting with volume, and I'm going to really make sure I leave these layout lines so that I have something to reference. All right, I've got that first petal kind of roughed out here. It's looking okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same on all 4 of these and just keep refining, making sure to leave a little extra material. I don't want to go too deep in any one area. And I kind of want to develop all of these 4 petals sort of together as I go. A little more burr life. Okay. Now, I also want to not forget to stop occasionally and use my plasticine clay to see what it looks like in the positive. So, yeah, looking okay there. It's starting to come together. There's a lot more work to be done, but so far this is going really quick and easy, and we're just going to keep refining little by little. So listen to the sound when I'm cutting, and you'll see when I'm cutting too slow or too aggressively. It kind of sounds bad. It sounds chattery and funky. And then when I'm just taking a nice light cut and spinning my tool pretty fast, you can hear that it sounds a lot cleaner and nice. So pay attention to that as you're watching this. got it roughed out. See what that looks like. Not too bad. It's getting there for sure. Now, there's a couple things I want to do. I want to square up and sharpen these tips. So I'm going to switch to a different tool to do that. And then I'm going to go in and just kind of keep refining these big, sort of the puffiest shapes. And also that little lip where the petals are supposed to overlap. I want to like use a different tool, probably a cylinder burr, to really make that pop. So it gives me a little more dimension. Looks like the flowers are slightly rotated. But yeah, using plasticine clay is really good. And if you put a little baby powder or talc powder on it before you press it, that helps it release and gives you a good look at it too. Okay, so I switched to a cylinder burr. I think this is a 2 millimeter diameter cylinder burr. Because this I can use at about a 45-degree angle and it'll give me a nice sharp edge, the corner, to go in and to sort of create the sharp part of these petals. I'll show you, maybe try out this burr. This is a carbide. It's kind of a funny bud burr, but these are really nice cutting tools. I'm going to use this to go in. I'm going to switch to an even smaller one. So I'm going to use this. It's a little smaller diameter than the big ball bears I was using. So I don't want to undercut this edge here, but I do kind of want to come in and give a nice sharp relief here because that's going to make my petal look like they're overlapping. All right, it's developing further and further. Now, if you notice, I change my orientation and I change the angle of my cutting tool so that I can generate the smoothest, best cut. And it's really important that I can see these layout lines and I'm slowly working to them. And it's not super easy to do. You might have to switch up your orientation of everything time and time again. But just take your time. And again, that's the beauty of the brass is just take your time, move slowly, make sure that you keep those layout lines intact, and then just slowly bring it all together. You might spend 2 hours doing this, but then you have a die that could last and make 50, 100 pairs of earrings or pendants or whatever you kind of are planning to make. So the time put into it, prototyping, working on this is well worth it. Got my plasticine clay. It's getting there little by little. So I'm going to switch to some silicone abrasive wheels to kind of start polishing and smoothing stuff out. And then I'll probably go back and keep refining. Again, the more you stop and you look at your plasticine clay, you see what that impression looks like. or even at some point you go press metal. The more you do that, the better the idea you're going to get of what you're creating, and the better and the more refined you can make that piece. So this is a blue Dedico silicone abrasive wheel. And this nice broad shape means I can get in there and I can kind of smooth stuff out. I do want to be careful with this bigger wheel. It's really easy to kind of go over your shape if you're not watching exactly where it is. So really take your time, and might have to actually go ahead and use a diamond knife sharpener to cut this wheel down. I use these cheap little diamond wheels here, and then I can go ahead and shape and make that smaller. I think this cylinder might be a little better. And the nice thing about these wheels is using that little diamond knife sharpener, just this chunky thing, I can shape it to fit exactly where I need it. So depending on the design I'm working with, I can shape this, restructure it to get in and smooth out this stuff. Now I can go in and clean up these sharp little points. Plasticine clay again. Starting to develop. I'm looking at it, and I kind of want to go in and accentuate a few of these lines in here. I think maybe I want to make the center just a hair bigger. So yeah, a couple things I want to do. And then before too long, we're going to go press some metal and come back so that we can see what it looks like with metal. The clay is going to show more detail than the metal will. So it's not a bad idea. We can always go press metal and come back and keep working on it. Okay, so got our die. I've got some 28 gauge copper that I cut into a square so I can fit it over there. And I'm going to drop this into our high pressure container. Again, make sure it's nice and clean. Drop the die in. Got the copper centered over that. And then again, got my nice urethane double stick tape to the punch. I'm going to slowly drop that in. Okay, there you go. That's all good to go. Now, I'm going to take this up to, about 6,000. There you go, 6,000 PSI. And let's see how it looks. So now, take a look at this. And yeah, so when we're looking at this, you can see a lot more texture and bumps. Overall, it's pretty good. What I'm looking at, I really want to do is just crisp up the whole border, accentuate these little tips, and then smooth stuff out a little bit so that I don't get these funny little ripples and texture in there. So now this is thin metal, so if I do this in like silver, thicker metal, it is going to, not show as much, but still, I'm going to try to go ahead and make this die as clean and smooth as I can. So let's go on back to the bench. All right, got my cylinder burn again. I want to go ahead and accentuate, kind of sharpen up these corners. I'm just using a really light touch in here, trying to create nice, smooth, good surfaces with crisp, clean edges, and just kind of, working in whatever manner I can where I can see the most, and where I can really see the light on my cut because I'm wanting to create nice, smooth surfaces. We'll still go in, we'll crisp this all up, but the better I can see and the better I can do here now, the better my finished product will be. So I'm just shaping this now to fit into the different spaces here. A little smaller radius. That's better. All right, now to a smaller pink wheel, kind of a sharp corner, so I can get in and probably working towards me is going to be the best. Okay, so I went ahead and pressed a piece of 22 gauge sterling silver here, and it looks pretty good, but I noticed there's still some funny little bumps in areas that look good in the die when it's polished, but really show up here. So this is where the silicone abrasive wheels, these ones from Dedico, or there's a couple companies that make them, that's where these are amazing because I can shape these to fit my die. So I'm gonna start with the blue. This is kind of a good fine, so it's not going to cut too deeply. But we're going to go ahead and start with this, and using just again a little cheap knife sharpener, I'm just going to shape this to a nice round, and I should be able to get in here. And I'm going to go highlight some of those areas. Oh, I need it to be a little sharper. A little tighter radius. And now as I'm doing this, I'm wanting to get into these corners, get these nice big round areas smoothed out, but I don't want to go over these sharp edges. I want to go right up to them and keep those crisp, sharp edges between the petals. Okay, that should be pretty good with the blue. Now I'm going to switch to the pink wheel. This is the finest of them. Other companies might have different colors, but this is going to be almost a polish. I want to start with kind of a tighter radius. I want to get in and get these little valleys and try to crisp and sharpen up those little creases in each petal. Oh. And what you'll find is sometimes you have to adapt your design to fit your tools. Or in this case, with these types of wheels, I'm adapting my tool to fit my design. Because I want the radius of this to just be able to go in there and nicely smooth and polish all of these little valleys in the die. All right, I'm gonna say that's good enough. Let's go press it. All right, so I got my brass die all wrapped up and I got some 24 gauge silver here that I rolled out to this thickness and then annealed. So we are putting a lot of pressure into these dies and we want to always be annealing our metal in these processes, and we're going to take it up to pretty high pressure. So if you can see here, got little marked out lines so I know where to place my silver. That way I have plenty around so that I can get my shape nicely. Also put a little bit of burlife in here. The liquid burlife is great, and I don't want it to pool in the die, but I do want the whole die to be just cleanly covered in oil. So just put a little on, wipe it off. Now I'm going to drop this into my high pressure container and then place my silver down, get that lined up on those marks. Make sure again everything is always super clean. And I'm going to drop this down in here. Boom, that's good. I don't want to spin it because I don't want that square to twist and get out of the way. So that's good. It's all the way down. It's not jammed. We should be good to go. All right, lock that. Look center and center here. And let's go ahead and press. All right, 10,000 PSI. You can go ahead and see that looks pretty nice there. So the corners aren't super puffed out, but I'm going to saw this and pierce that out so that'll make the corners of the flower look nice and crisp and sharp. And you know, I might go back and still tweak a few things on this die, but I'm going to go ahead and finish this out, and I'll drop some video of the finished little pendant at the end of this. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you got a lot of good value out of this and learned a lot about non-conforming dies. Just a few things I will say is take your time, be patient, and spend time working on this. This took me maybe an hour start to finish, you know, and I might go back and refine it a little bit, but yeah, be patient with yourself and just keep putting in the time, and you really can do really amazing things with making your own non-conforming dies, like we did with the brass. And here at Bonny Doon, we can also make custom non-conforming dies for you. So don't forget to go check out our website, bonnydoontools.com, for all of this free info, instructions, and more, so that you can really get the most out of your press and out of your tooling. You know, dies like this might cost a couple $100, might take a few hours, but now I can probably create 20 to 50 pieces off of this brass die, if not more than that. So a little bit of time up front really gives us the potential to make a lot of nice, repeatable, beautiful pieces quick and easily. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for all of our videos teaching you all about the hydraulic press. Thanks for watching.